The cargo freighter Nexus Dawn drifted through the void between star systems like a metal beast, carrying the hopes and goods of 14 different worlds. Within its sprawling corridors, 18 alien species worked together in an uneasy harmony, built on strict hierarchy and ancient prejudices. At the very bottom of this complex social ladder sat one unremarkable human. Marcus Webb crawled out of maintenance shaft Delta 7 with his coveralls soaked in hydraulic fluid, and his brown hair matted with sweat. He had spent the last 4 hours replacing corroded pressure valves that should have been changed months ago. The aliens who ran this ship treated maintenance like an afterthought, something to be handled by the lowest form of life they could find. Human. The sharp voice belonged to Sub-Commander Korath, a towering draconian with scales that shifted from deep purple to angry red when he was annoyed. His reptilian eyes looked down at Marcus with the same expression someone might use when stepping around garbage. The food processors in Section 9 are malfunctioning again. Fix them before the next meal cycle. Marcus nodded without speaking and gathered his tools. There was no point in explaining that the food processors were failing, because nobody wanted to spend credits on proper replacement parts. The aliens on this ship saw him as nothing more than a convenient pair of hands that could fit into tight spaces and handle the dirty work they considered beneath them. Captain Vorthak ruled the Nexus Dawn like an emperor commanding his domain. The massive Zentaurian stood nearly 9 feet tall, with 4 muscular arms and skin like polished stone. His species had conquered half a dozen star systems through pure military might, and Vorthak never let anyone forget it. In the 8 months Marcus had worked on this ship, the captain had never once acknowledged his existence directly. The ship's chief engineer was a crystalline being named Zinth, whose body looked like living diamond and whose mind worked faster than most computers. Zinth was supposed to supervise Marcus, but the alien spent all his time on the upper decks working with the advanced systems, the faster-than-light drive, the quantum computers, the antimatter containment units. These were the toys that interested Zinth. Everything else got dumped on the human. Marcus made his way through the ship's lower levels, passing crew members, who looked through him as if he were invisible. A group of Aquarian traders discussed shipping routes in their musical language, their blue-green skin shimmering under the corridor lights. 2 insectoid security officers clicked and buzzed to each other about weapon inspections, their compound eyes never glancing in Marcus's direction. The food processors were indeed broken, but not in the way anyone expected. Marcus opened the access panels and immediately saw that someone had been stealing components. 3 power regulators were missing, along with most of the backup circuits. This wasn't mechanical failure. This was theft. But who would believe a human's word against alien crew members? While he worked, Marcus listened to everything around him. Other species saw this as a sign of stupidity or servility, but humans had evolved as social creatures who survived by understanding their environment completely. Marcus heard the nervous conversations about increased pirate activity in the next system. He noticed the way certain crew members seemed unusually interested in the ship's course and cargo manifest. Most importantly, Marcus had been documenting problems that everyone else ignored. The power distribution network was running at dangerous levels. Hull plating in several sections showed stress fractures that would become fatal if the ship encountered any significant impact. The life support system had backup failures that nobody had bothered to fix because the primary system still functioned. But the discovery that truly worried Marcus had come 3 weeks ago while cleaning air vents near the computer core. Hidden among the standard components, he had found devices that definitely did not belong there. Small, sophisticated transmitters that were broadcasting the ship's location and technical specifications to unknown receivers. Marcus had considered reporting this discovery to Captain Vorthak or Sub-Commander Korath, but he knew exactly what would happen. They would either dismiss him entirely or accuse him of incompetence. Humans, in their opinion, lacked the intelligence to understand advanced technology. If Marcus claimed to have found tracking devices, they would assume he was either lying or too stupid to recognize normal equipment. So Marcus kept the information to himself while quietly gathering more evidence. He noticed that the transmitters became more active when the ship passed through certain regions of space. He observed that their course had been mysteriously altered, 4 times in recent weeks, always taking them through systems known for criminal activity. The food processor repair took Marcus 3 hours to complete properly. He had to fabricate replacement parts from salvaged materials because nobody wanted to authorize the cost of genuine components. When he finished, the machines ran more efficiently than they had in years. As he cleaned his tools, Marcus thought about his fellow crew members and their casual contempt for humanity. They saw his species as primitive scavengers from a backwards world, useful only for manual labor and simple tasks. They had no idea that humans had earned their place in galactic civilization through pure determination and innovative thinking. What the aliens did not know was that Marcus Webb was not just any human engineer. Before joining the crew of Nexus, Dawn, he had spent 6 years maintaining military vessels for the Terran Defense Corps. He had kept ships operational during combat when every system was pushed beyond its design limits and failure meant death for hundreds of crew members. Marcus was quiet because he was always listening and learning. He worked alone because he was preparing for something the others could not imagine. He never complained because he understood that his real test had not yet arrived. That test was coming soon. Marcus could feel it in the subtle changes to the ship's routine, in the increasing activity of those hidden transmitters, in the nervous energy that seemed to infect the crew. Something was hunting the Nexus Dawn, and when it struck, the aliens would discover what their invisible human was truly capable of accomplishing. The attack came during the night shift, when most of the Nexus Dawn crew was sleeping in their quarters. Marcus was awake, as he often was during these quiet hours working on a malfunctioning atmospheric processor in the lower cargo bay. He had learned that the best time for his real work was when the corridors were empty and the aliens were not, watching his every move. The first warning was not an explosion or an alarm. It was a subtle change in the ship's vibration pattern, a slight irregularity in the engine hum that most crew members would never notice. But Marcus noticed everything. He stopped working and pressed his ear to the bulkhead, listening carefully to the ship's mechanical heartbeat. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and died completely for 3 terrifying seconds. When the emergency power kicked in, the corridors were bathed in angry red light and the ship's warning sirens began their deafening wail. Captain Vorthak's voice boomed through the communication system, his usually controlled tone cracking with shock. "All crew to emergency stations. We are under attack. This is not a drill." Marcus dropped his tools and ran toward the nearest observation port. Through the reinforced transparasteel, he could see the nightmare unfolding in the void around them. 4 sleek warships had appeared from nowhere, their hulls painted in the matte black of professional raiders. Laser fire streaked between the vessels like deadly lightning, and Marcus could see that the attackers were targeting specific points on the Nexus Dawn with surgical precision. The ship lurched violently as something massive struck the hull. Marcus was thrown against the corridor wall, but he kept moving toward the engineering section. He needed to assess the damage before it became irreversible. Other crew members were running past him in panic, their usual arrogance replaced by raw terror. Sub-Commander Korath stumbled past, his purple scales now pale with fear. "They came out of hyperspace right on top of us," he shouted to no one in particular. "How did they know our exact position?" Marcus knew the answer, but there was no time to explain about the tracking devices he had discovered. The ship shuddered again, and this time he heard the terrible sound of metal being torn apart. Somewhere on the Nexus Dawn, the hull was being breached. In the main engineering section, chaos reigned supreme. Chief Engineer Zinth's crystalline body was flashing rapid patterns of red and orange, the colors of panic and desperation in his species. Sparks flew from damaged control panels while smoke filled the air with the acrid smell of burning electronics. "Status report." Captain Vorthak's voice crackled over the intercom, but Zinth could barely respond coherently. "Main engines are hit," the crystalline being announced, his voice distorting with stress. "We have lost 40% power. Hull breach in Section 5. The faster-than-light drive is offline." Another impact shook the ship so violently that several crew members were knocked off their feet. Marcus grabbed a support beam to steady himself and watched the engineering displays with growing alarm. The attackers were not just firing randomly. They were systematically destroying the ship's most critical systems. "Hull breach in Section 7. Someone screamed over the communication system. "We are losing atmosphere fast." The ship's defensive weapons were firing back, but Marcus could see from the tactical displays that it was hopeless. The Nexus Dawn was a cargo vessel, not a warship. Her weapons were designed to frighten off small pirates, not fight military-grade attack vessels. Captain Vorthak appeared in the engineering section, his massive frame filling the doorway. For the first time, since Marcus had known him, the Xantorian leader looked uncertain and afraid. "Zinth, can we escape? Can we jump to hyperspace?" The chief engineer's crystalline form turned deep red. "Negative, Captain. The hyperdrive is completely destroyed. Main engines are failing. We are trapped." "What about emergency repairs?" Vorthak demanded. "Impossible," Zinth replied, his voice rising to a near shriek. "The damage is too extensive. We would need a complete engineering crew and a full repair facility. We have maybe 2 hours before total system failure." Marcus listened to this exchange while studying the damage reports flowing across the engineering displays. The situation was indeed desperate but not hopeless. The aliens were thinking in terms of standard repair procedures and proper equipment. They could not imagine the improvised solutions that human engineers learned to create under impossible conditions. "The power core is overheating," Zinth announced, his body now flashing between red and black, the colors that meant imminent death. "The containment field is failing. If we cannot cool the reactor, it will go critical in less than 4 hours. Captain Vorthak looked around the engineering section with the expression of a leader who had run out of options. "Prepare the escape pods," he ordered quietly. "We will abandon ship and hope the attackers show mercy to survivors." "Captain!" Sub-Commander Korath's voice came over the intercom, heavy with defeat. "The attackers are demanding our surrender. They say they will destroy us completely if we do not comply within 10 minutes. Marcus watched the alien crew members around him giving up hope. They were already talking about surrender terms and evacuation procedures. None of them understood that the Nexus Dawn was far from finished. The ship was wounded, but she was not yet dead. While the aliens argued about surrender protocols, Marcus quietly slipped away from the main engineering section. He moved through maintenance corridors and service tunnels that most of the crew had forgotten existed. These narrow passages had been his domain for 8 months, and he knew every pipe, every cable, every access panel in the ship's lower levels. In his tool locker, Marcus retrieved a small tablet computer that he had been using for his secret project. The screen displayed engineering diagrams that no one else on the ship had ever seen, modifications and improvements that Marcus had been planning since his first week aboard the Nexus Dawn. The aliens thought their ship was dying. They were wrong. Marcus Webb was about to show them what human engineering could accomplish when everything seemed lost. The real battle was just beginning, and this time, the quiet human would not be invisible. While the alien crew debated surrender, terms, and evacuation procedures, Marcus Webb disappeared into the mechanical heart of the dying ship. The maintenance tunnels were filled with smoke and the acrid smell of burning circuits, but Marcus moved through them with the confidence of someone who knew every bolt and wire in the vessel's construction. His first priority was the hull breach, in Section 7. According to Chief Engineer Zinth, the damage was too extensive for emergency repairs, but Zinth was thinking like a crystalline being who required perfect materials and precise engineering tolerances. Marcus was thinking like a human who had learned to make miracles from scrap metal and determination. The breach was a jagged tear nearly 6 feet long where enemy laser fire had sliced through the outer hull like a hot knife through paper. Atmosphere was streaming out into space in a visible plume of frozen moisture, and the emergency foam seals had already failed under the pressure differential. Marcus examined the damage with the calm focus of an engineer who had faced similar challenges before. In the Terran Defense Corps, he had patched hull breaches during combat using whatever materials were available. This was actually smaller than some of the holes he had sealed while under enemy fire. From his toolkit, Marcus retrieved a device that looked like a modified welding torch. He had built it himself during his 3rd month on the ship, combining parts from the machine shop with components salvaged from broken equipment. The aliens had never bothered to ask what their human maintenance worker was creating in his spare time. Working quickly, Marcus began cutting metal plates from non-critical structural panels in the lower cargo bay. Each piece had to be precisely shaped to match the irregular outline of the hull breach. The ship continued to shudder under enemy fire while he worked, but Marcus had learned long ago to maintain steady hands even when the world was falling apart around him. The real innovation came in his welding technique. Standard procedure called for depressurizing the entire section before attempting repairs. But that would take hours they did not have. Instead, Marcus had developed a method for welding under pressure using a combination of magnetic field generators and rapid cooling compounds. As he worked, Marcus could hear Captain Vorthak's voice over the intercom, growing more desperate with each announcement. All sections report status. We need options for escape or surrender. But Marcus was not interested in escape or surrender. He was interested in proving that human engineering could accomplish what alien technology could not. The first hull patch took him 40 minutes to complete, working alone in a pressurized environment that should have made repairs impossible. His second priority was the overheating power core. Marcus made his way to the reactor compartment through service tunnels that bypassed the main corridors where panicked crew members were still running back and forth. The reactor chamber was a hellish environment of red warning lights and screaming alarms. Chief Engineer Zinth was there, staring helplessly at displays that showed the containment field weakening with each passing minute. The crystalline being's body was now flashing pure black, the color that meant certain death was approaching. The cooling system is destroyed, Zinth said without looking up. The plasma conduits are ruptured. We cannot repair this without shutting down the entire reactor. And if we do that, we will have no power for life support. Marcus studied the reactor displays while Zinth continued listing all the reasons why repairs were impossible. The alien engineer was correct about the standard repair procedures, but humans had learned to think outside the boundaries of standard procedures. I need you to reroute power from non-essential systems, Marcus said quietly. Zinth's crystalline head turned toward him in surprise. It was the first time the chief engineer had ever heard the human speak, without being directly ordered to do so. What are you talking about? Zinth demanded. There are no non-essential systems. Everything is needed for basic survival. Marcus was already moving toward the reactor control panel, his fingers dancing across interfaces that he had studied for months but never been allowed to touch. Decorative lighting in the passenger quarters, climate control for empty cargo bays, automated cleaning systems. Each one draws power that we can redirect to stabilize the containment field. That is impossible, Zinth protested. The power distribution network is not designed for that kind of modification. Marcus was already implementing the changes, rerouting power through backup circuits that most engineers had forgotten existed. His tablet computer displayed wiring diagrams that showed alternative pathways through the ship's electrical system, routes that he had mapped during months of quiet observation. The network has more flexibility than you realize, Marcus said, watching as power levels began to stabilize. You just have to know where to look. Within 30 minutes, the reactor's temperature had dropped to safe levels. The containment field was holding steady, and the immediate threat of core breach had been eliminated. Zinth stared at the displays in amazement, his crystalline body shifting to patterns of blue and white that indicated wonder and confusion. How did you know about those backup circuits? Zinth asked. Marcus was already moving toward his next objective. I pay attention to details. His third priority was restoring engine power. The main propulsion systems had been hit hard by enemy fire, but Marcus had identified alternative solutions that did not require the primary engines. The ship's maneuvering thrusters were still functional, and with the right modifications they could provide enough thrust for basic mobility. Working in the engine compartment while the ship continued to take damage, Marcus began connecting the maneuvering thrusters to the main power grid through improvised relay systems. It was dangerous work that required him to crawl through spaces filled with superheated plasma conduits and electrical systems that could kill him instantly if he made a mistake. But Marcus had learned to work in dangerous conditions during his military service. His hands moved with practiced precision as he rerouted power cables and modified control circuits. Each connection had to be perfect, because there would be no second chances. Above him, he could hear the sounds of the continuing battle, Enemy weapons were still hammering the ship's hull, and the crew was still panicking about their hopeless situation. But in the engine compartment, something impossible was beginning to happen. The maneuvering thrusters came online with a low rumble that vibrated through the ship's superstructure. For the first time since the attack began, the Nexus Dawn had propulsion power. It was not much, but it was enough to change the tactical situation completely. Marcus made his way back toward the main engineering section, where he found Captain Vorthak and Sub-Commander Korath, staring at displays that showed systems coming back online throughout the ship. Hull breach sealed, reactor stabilized. Engines responding. "How is this possible?" Captain Vorthak demanded, his forearms gesturing in confusion. Zinth said the ship was beyond repair. Chief Engineer Zinth's crystalline body was now flashing patterns of silver and gold, colors that indicated respect and admiration. "The human," he said quietly. "The human did this. I do not understand how, but he has accomplished what should have been impossible." For the first time in 8 months, Captain Vorthak looked directly at Marcus Webb. The massive Zentorian's stone-like features showed an expression that the human had never seen before, genuine surprise mixed with something that might have been respect. "Human," Vorthak said slowly. "What else can you do?" Marcus checked his tablet computer, where new engineering diagrams were already appearing. The ship was no longer dying, but the battle was far from over. The quiet human was just getting started. Captain Vorthak's question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus looked up from his tablet computer, where new diagrams were already forming. Modifications that would transform the dying cargo ship into something the attackers had never expected to face. "I can give you weapons," Marcus said quietly. "Real weapons." Sub-Commander Korath's purple scales shifted to deep red with disbelief. "Impossible. This is a cargo vessel. We have only basic defensive systems." Marcus was already moving toward the main engineering console, his fingers flying across controls that he had studied for months but never been authorized to touch. Every ship is a weapon if you know how to use it properly. On the tactical displays, the 4 enemy vessels were closing in for what they clearly expected to be the final assault. Their formations showed the confidence of predators who believed their prey was helpless. They had no idea that the Nexus Dawn was about to become very dangerous. Marcus began implementing modifications that made Chief Engineer Zinth's crystalline body flash with patterns of amazement and terror. The human was rerouting the ship's main cargo handling systems, transforming industrial equipment into improvised artillery. "The magnetic cargo launchers," Marcus explained as he worked. "They are designed to move 20-ton containers at high velocity. With some modifications, they can launch anything we want at any target we choose." Captain Vorthak watched in fascination as Marcus converted peaceful cargo equipment into weapons of war. The ship's massive loading cranes were being repositioned to serve as gun mounts. The pressurization systems that normally kept cargo safe were being modified to create explosive projectiles. "The enemy ships are moving closer," Sub-Commander Korath reported from the tactical station. "They seem to believe we are preparing to surrender." Marcus smiled grimly. "Let them think that. The closer they get, the better this will work." His next modification was even more audacious. The ship's industrial fusion cutters, normally used for breaking down scrap metal, were being redirected to focus through the main sensor array. With enough power behind them, the cutters could become devastating beam weapons. "This is insane," Zinth whispered, but his crystalline body was now flashing patterns of gold and silver that indicated deep respect. "You are turning our entire ship into a weapon." Marcus nodded as he continued working. "Human military doctrine. Any tool can become a weapon if you understand its true potential." The first test came when one of the enemy ships moved within range of the modified cargo launcher. Marcus had loaded the launcher with a container filled with scrap metal and volatile chemicals, essentially a giant shotgun shell that would spread destruction across a wide area. "Firing cargo launcher 1, Marcus announced calmly. The Nexus Dawn shuddered as the massive magnetic system hurled its improvised projectile toward the enemy vessel. The pirates clearly had no idea what was coming toward them, until their ship's hull erupted in a spectacular explosion of metal fragments and chemical fire. "Direct hit," Korath shouted in amazement. "Their port engine is completely destroyed." The enemy formation scattered in confusion. Their intelligence about the Nexus Dawn had told them it was a helpless cargo vessel with minimal weapons. They had not prepared for a ship that could turn its own cargo equipment into artillery. Marcus was already preparing the next surprise. The industrial fusion cutters were now online and focused into a coherent beam that could slice through military-grade armor like paper. When the second enemy ship tried to close distance for a boarding attempt, Marcus triggered the modified cutting system. The beam lanced out across space and carved a precise line along the enemy ship's hull. Atmosphere vented from the wound like blood from a fatal cut, and the vessel began spinning helplessly as its structural integrity failed. "Two down," Marcus said quietly, already working on his next modification. Captain Vorthak was staring at the tactical displays with an expression of wonder that the human had never seen on any alien face before. "How did you know to prepare these modifications?" Marcus continued working as he answered, "I have been studying this ship for 8 months. Every system, every component, every possible configuration. When you treat someone as invisible, they have time to learn things that might surprise you." The remaining 2 enemy ships were now keeping their distance, clearly unsure how to deal with a cargo vessel that had suddenly become more dangerous than a military cruiser. Their attack formation had dissolved into confusion and defensive maneuvering. Marcus activated the ship's communication system and broadcast a message on all frequencies. His voice was calm and professional, the tone of someone who was completely in control of the situation. "Attention attacking vessels. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this area, or you will be destroyed. This is your only warning." "Sub-Commander." Korath looked at Marcus in amazement. "You are threatening them? They still outnumber us 2-1. Marcus was already implementing his final modification, a system so audacious that even he had not been sure it would work until this moment. The ship's main reactor was being temporarily reconfigured to create a massive electromagnetic pulse that would disable any electronics within a wide radius. "Numbers do not matter when your enemy cannot fight back," Marcus explained. The enemy ships responded to his warning by opening fire with everything they had. Laser beams and missile trails filled the space around the Nexus Dawn as the pirates made their desperate final assault. Marcus triggered the electromagnetic pulse. The wave of energy that erupted from the Nexus Dawn was like a silent explosion that rendered every piece of electronic equipment within 1,000 kilometers completely useless. The enemy ships went dark instantly, their weapons offline, their engines dead, their life support systems failing. In the sudden silence that followed, Marcus began restoring power to the Nexus Dawn systems using shielded backup circuits that he had prepared for exactly this moment. Within minutes, their ship was fully operational while their enemies drifted helplessly in space. Captain Vorthak looked at Marcus with an expression that combined respect, fear, and genuine admiration. "Human," he said slowly, "I owe you an apology. We all do." Marcus nodded quietly and returned to his control station. Around him, the alien crew members were looking at him with new eyes. The quiet, invisible maintenance worker had just saved their lives using nothing but creativity, determination, and an understanding of engineering that none of them had imagined possible. "Sir," Marcus said, addressing Captain Vorthak directly, for the first time, "I recommend we broadcast our victory to other ships in this sector. Word needs to spread about what happened here today." The massive Zentorian captain nodded slowly. "And what message should we send?" Marcus smiled. "That humans are no longer invisible, and we are definitely not harmless." The tide had turned completely. The hunt was over and the hunters had become the hunted.